We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, May 30th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin and you're watching News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska Dainha.
Happy Thursday, everyone!
Happy Thursday! And Walter Lee.
How lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, as usual, we're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending online over the past 24 hours. Samsung Electronics is set to face its first ever worker walkout. The National Samsung Electronics Union, the largest labor union at the tech giant representing 22% of the company's workforce, announced on Wednesday that its members would use their annual leave to walk out for one day on June 7th after failing to reach a wage agreement with the company. The union says this marks the beginning of a collective action that could lead to a larger walkout. Now moving on the entertainment front, HYBE announced on Tuesday a 68 billion Korean won or around $50 million sale of its stake in SM Entertainment. HYBE sold approximately 755,000 shares and 90,531 won per share in a block deal, a 5.5% discount from SM's Monday closing price of 95,800 won. This sale reduces HYBE's stake in SM from 12.45% to 9.37%. Local media reports that because it was a minority stake without influence on SM's management rights, HYBE decided it was better to sell in bulk and earn profits. The company had lost a takeover bid for SM to Korean IT giant Kakao in February last year. Now finally, while suits have long been considered the most appropriate attire for a job interview, a new trend is emerging among IT companies here in Korea. More applicants are reportedly wearing what's being called the IT developer look, which includes hoodies, tracksuits, and jeans during their interviews. Employees at these companies say this shift is due to a growing focus on prioritizing one's abilities and skills over what they wear. IT giants like Naver and Kakao have already adopted casual dress codes for their job interviews. Now, this marks a significant departure from the past when there was a standardized job interview outfit, sometimes referred to here in Korea as the black pen look, where interviewees typically wore white shirts and black pants. So here in the studio, what do you think about this change in fashion?
Well, yeah, I used to be a person who loved wearing suits back in the day. I used to have a range of suits.
Really?
But I did. Thanks. May not look it, right? I clearly have chosen color today. But,
Right.
But yes, anyway, I think this is a great change in society, only because I think that when you dress, you show a lot of who you are as a person.
Right.
It reflects your personality, and it actually could probably help distinguish people like the HR department who they decide is probably better for the job. As an example, if you were to come in casual, if you were to look a little bit scruffy, you're not looking good, but you know that that's exactly the way you dress, that might actually impact the way that they obviously whether they hire you or not. But if you look clean cut still, you can still look quite nice in a purple shirt. So I think it's possible anyway. You might get the job just based on the fact that you look clean and cut without having the boring, everyone looking the same black suit and tie.
Right, and these fashion and what you wear really, as you mentioned, kind of shows who you are, your color and character. Walter, who is wearing an IT developer look that we just mentioned in our news feed.
Yes.
Now, what are your thoughts on this, Cheska?
I mean, clearly, I'm holding the Monami pen today.
You're wearing the black pen look.
I am, clearly, with a little bit of style, I suppose. But I actually do agree with Walter. I think in terms of workplaces, I mean, we've noticed that especially in IT, when people come to work, they do not wear suits to program or code, right? So I do believe that having a little bit of freedom in terms of how to dress more casually could enhance the work efficiency. However, I just want to add one more comment about the fact that how you dress does determine how you behave.
Right.
So there have been some psychological studies that depending on the amount of time or attention you pay to your attire, your posture changes and the way that your mannerism also gets changes, right? So I hope that some people don't abuse this and go all the way to the extreme.
For example.
It's purple! I
not-
dressed nice today.
I did not say anything. For example, people don't take it to certain extremes and come into work like they just woke up from their bed.
Right. Oh, okay. I think that, as you mentioned, that line is really important. Casual but not sloppy.
Exactly.
For a job interview. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. We're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. A quick question for our viewers. Now, what comes to your mind when you hear the word protest? Now, many of you might think of in-person demonstrations or gatherings where people hold signs and chant for what they believe in. Now, but these days, a new type of protest led by millennials and Gen Z is actually gaining momentum. Let's take a look at the screen. Unlike previous generations who held protests in person, millennials and Gen Z are taking their movements to diverse platforms, including online. We've seen them lead boycotts, hashtag campaigns, and start online petitions to stand up against what they believe is unjust. But have you heard about sending protest trucks? This trend began with K-pop fans who sent trucks with giant LED signs to the management agencies of their favorite artists to express their dissatisfaction with certain decisions. Now, we're seeing our generation send these protest trucks to food, sports, and gaming companies. What are the reasons behind this movement? Right, so these protest trucks have become more popular since COVID-19 when in-person gatherings were restricted due to social distancing rules. Now, just a few days ago, another example, we saw fans of Fubao, the giant panda, sending a truck to the Chinese embassy in Seoul, demanding better treatment for the panda after allegations of her receiving inadequate care in China. But it's actually not just fans, K-pop fans, who are sending these trucks to make their voices heard. As we briefly mentioned in the VCR, Cheska, can you tell us like a more examples on people sending these protest trucks to make their voices heard?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned, the truck protest is something very interesting and also unique to our generation. Now, one of the things is a truck with a 150-inch about LED board that is attached, usually has a blaring large message written on the truck as we saw in the VCR.
Right.
And it has been actually used by K-pop fans, especially in terms of the argument that is going on between the HYBE company, but it's actually now spreading for other labor issues, including worker salaries and also consumer protests.
Right.
Now, I've actually did a little bit of research, and there are also variations. And just to give you a few, some use buses.
Buses?
Yeah, because it actually goes around the city. So
Oh,
it's just
I
a
see.
moving sort of advertisement board, I suppose. And one particular category of users in gaming even sent horse-ridden carriages to actively display their discontent.
Horse-ridden carriages, they
Yeah.
still exist.
They do, apparently, yeah.
Not in amusement parks.
Or New York City, Manhattan, but apparently it did, yeah.
Right, so we're seeing like these kind of movements being started by our generation. Now, Walter, my question to you is like sending trucks for protest seems like a lot of work, but
Yes.
why is our generation like doing these things to make their voices heard? What are the reasons?
I think, well, in my opinion, I mean, it's the better way to get anyone's attention, right? A loudspeaker with a big LED screen.
Right.
What else? Like, everyone's going to look. It's sort of annoying, to be honest with you, but it grabs the attention of people. As Jessica mentioned, these are not, it's a very common thing in Korea to see all these different kinds of buses and trucks, and they're very eye-catching. So listen, it's honestly a very smart way of doing it, to
Right.
be honest with you. And it's just great for anyone who wants to get their message across. I've worked with some big broadcasting companies before, and they always have trucks at the front. And though you don't want to listen to it, though it's very loud, it's excessively loud, you kind of get like the reason for it. The reason why they do it is because it grabs the attention of people inside.
Right, definitely these methods are indeed attention grabbing, and this trend actually highlights a typical trend of millennials and Gen Z, which is, as we talked about on NewsGen, they're more self-expressive than other generations. They're passionate about expressing their thoughts and act based on their values, even when they buy a product. Like, for example, when we talked about meaning out consumption, value-based consumption on NewsGen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is definitely a key trend of our generation, as you mentioned. And bus display is just one example, but I think MZ consumers generally have shown very visible interest and very concrete intention in their consumption choices. So let's take a look at the screen to see if the actual numbers do reflect this trend. So as you can see very clearly from the figures, there was almost an 80% increase in a very conscious spending, and over 70% of those who spend it for public interest or benefit. Now, this means means that people actually care about how far their dollar, or in our case, won,
Right.
sort of travel in terms of having a social impact, as well as consciously checking to see if the brand or the product actually aligns with the values. And I think one of the reasons that more companies of our generation invest a lot in ESG, which is environmental social governance, is exactly for this reason, is because now consumers really care about what the companies are doing and are likely to choose a brand that does promote sustainability and have values that can actually better the world. Yeah.
Right, so they're actually trying to voice out what they believe in, what they think is right, even by sending these protest trucks or
Yes.
protest buses, right?
And with their dollars and the money spent as well. Yeah.
Right, definitely, definitely. Now, anything that you'd like to add, Walter?
Well, it's quite interesting that they're spending their money, because I think like a reason why we're so expressive is we purchase these things because of high inflation, and they're going to cost a lot more.
Right.
So the price of everything is going up, yet our pay still seems to stay the same. And so therefore we have a certain standard when we spend a lot of money. We really want this product or whatever to be up to our level. And if we don't, we're very, very quick to say how we feel, express our thoughts on the situation. And this also can be translated to social issues as well, as we've seen a lot of movements happen over the past decade.
Right.
When something doesn't meet to a social standard, we're very quick to protest. So I think this is the new generation's way of getting their voice heard.
Right, so our generation doing these movements or launching these campaigns to make our voices being heard, it's kind of being called as active consumerism these days, unlike passive consumerism where people just stopped after buying a product. So let's talk a bit more about why we're seeing active consumerism, especially among our generation.
Yeah, and I love that word, the active consumerism, because our generation is known to be quote, radically active, right? So when we believe in something, we take actions very quickly. So first and foremost, I think it's the environment.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about just the planet environment, but the digital savvy environment that we grew up in. So we are more active online, meaning we post a lot of feedbacks, we review a lot of feedbacks, and we sort of talked about it, how we make our purchases, right?
Right.
We look at the YouTube videos, the reviews before actually choosing a product. And a lot of reviews come even from very personal social media. And we've seen, especially in our generation, almost a boom in spending because someone posted this really cute video.
It goes viral.
Exactly, it goes viral very, very quickly. And in Korean, they call it 돈 줄래다, which literally translates into punish with money, which is a funny paradox, but you really support that company or the producer so much that you just lavy them with money and you just go out and buy them. And actually, I mean, I think some companies actually started to use this and host environmental related activities such as plugging, which is running and picking up trash, or even recycling. And one of the companies called Spam, which is a ham company, for those of you who may not know, the consumers started to return the lid because it's a plastic lid so that it can be recycled. So these are some of the very, very active consumerism, as you mentioned, that people are partaking in.
Yeah, active consumerism led by our generation that is making changes. Now, what do you think about this, Walter? Anything that you'd like to add more?
Oh, first, thank you for explaining what spam is, Jessica.
There are people who may not know what spam is.
I'm pretty sure there's not one person out there who doesn't know what spam is.
I'm the active consumerism.
But, you know, we are the MZ generation. We don't just think, we act, as we've explained before. There are various channels for us to act upon and voice our opinions on. This is unlike the older generation, you know, we couldn't go online back in the day to express how we felt. So we utilize both offline and online platforms to express our views, which means that it's double the situation. Like if we're not happy with an online review, we'll go out there and we'll buy a truck and then for some reason put a big LED sign in front of the company. So we're very articulate when we talk about our social problems, our problems in general. And I think in most cases, it's a positive movement. There are obviously some negative ones as well.
Which we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about a little bit later. They clearly express what they want. We clearly express what we want, such as bringing back, example, discontinued products.
Right.
That's a positive thing.
Yeah, of course.
We want this to come back. This is something that we also love to do. We make clear value judgments about our positions from unfair corporate brands and ensure accountability. Accountability is a huge thing, I think, as well. And we prioritize ethics over products and services like Tessica mentioned, often engaging in boycotts, as we saw in our news feed as well, and against problematic companies as well.
Right, so based on ethics, accountability, and also not just thinking but acting. So these are all traits of active consumerism that's being shared among millennials and Gen Z, our generation. So to dive deeper into this phenomenon, we're going to bring an expert into our discussion after the break. Right, we're back. Today we're joined by Dr. Jared Watson, Assistant Professor of Marketing at New York University Stern School of Business. Welcome, Dr. Watson, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So our first question for you is, millennial and Gen Z consumers in Korea, as we mentioned in our discussion, seem very active in voicing their opinions. So why do you think this is the case, and is this something universal?
Yeah, let's work backwards. So I think it is a universal movement that we're seeing take place. In America, we have a saying called ignorance is bliss. And today, right, with the provision of information in the digital sphere, millennials and Gen Z are online more than any other generation. It's hard to remain ignorant. Right? We understand what goes into the products we use. We understand who is helped and who is hurt by those actions. And so as a result, we have to effectively live our values with what we buy because of that.
And Professor, here we briefly talked about like the conscious spending and active consumerism, but is this because of certain traits that set millennial and Gen Z consumers apart from other generations? We'd love to hear it from you.
Sure. I think one of the other big differences that we've seen across cohorts or across generations is just what the ideal life looks like, right? And so we've all heard of the idea of the dream life and what that looked like. And millennials and Gen Zs understand that with the constrained economy, with global catastrophe, we don't have some of the opportunities that the generations before us do have. And so with the resources that we do, we want to have an impact. We want to ensure that we create equity and fairness and leave it a better world than the previous generations have left us.
It's a very fascinating answer, Doctor. Millennials and Gen Z are known for pursuing ethical, value-based and active consumption. Do you think this is the proper or, let's say, right way to consume a product or service?
I think it can be. Right, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but in general, given the choice between a traditional product or one with these added values coming from the social aspect or the psychological aspect of us feeling better for what we're doing, we can actually see greater returns on enjoyment of that product for that same price that we're paying, which is fantastic. The flip side of that is we can really never have complete information. So we think we might be making the right decision, but somewhere along the supply chain, there's some challenges. And so if we are pursuing to a righteous end every single item we consume, it could be overwhelming. And so it's really finding the proper balance of understanding where we can have the best contributions for our dollars without effectively exerting all of our energy in trying to do so.
All right, Dr. Watson, thank you so much for your valuable insights today. We really appreciate them.
It was my pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Right, some great answers from our expert. Now, we also asked our viewers, you guys, if they know any examples where consumer action has sparked changes in their country. And here's what 3 of them said. So if we look at the screen, Rex Alex says, yes, consumer advocates in the Philippines have helped promote transparency in business. For example, claims in advertising need to be defensible and companies can be held liable for false claims made by their brands. Benny says, for me, multinational companies that have a branch in the Philippines decided to change names and the culture to really introduce their new environment to current and upcoming employees of the company. Leon says, in Singapore, consumer demand for sustainable practices has pushed major supermarket chains to reduce plastic bag use use. Also, consumer interest in health and wellness has led businesses to introduce healthier menu options. So these three comments that we just saw kind of show like the good examples of how active consumerism really made much needed changes in their countries. So it's really amazing to see these changes being made through campaigns, movements, protest trucks that we've discussed all day. But as Dr. Watson mentioned, I want to ask you guys too, is there anything that these consumers or activists should be mindful of when trying to carry out these actions?
Yeah, it's a great question because as Professor mentioned, the reason that we're doing this is for equity and fairness, to quote the professor, right? So we're trying to go in the more positive direction. So clearly getting the message across, I think, is important. But sometimes, and I'm including myself in it too, I think our generation definitely has a tendency to be radically active, meaning we don't think the steps through or the consequences.
Right, sometimes.
And we're very eager to act because we really want to see the impact and the changes visibly right now. And sometimes it can go so far that it becomes a personal or very group vengeance instead of actually making the changes that are necessary or solving the problem. So at the end of the day, it's not about bringing someone down. The goal is to really improve and make sure that this world becomes better, not just for us, but the companies and the people that are involved. So I think myself included, I think that is something they should be really, really mindful of because I too make those mistakes as well. Yeah.
Right, and I think listening to your answer, I think that another flip side to this is always doing fact check well, because what we think as being wrong sometimes might not always be like the fact, or it might not always be correct. So doing fact checking, as we always talk about, it seems to be important as well. Now, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree with Cheska. Like, sometimes when push comes to shove, there is no other way except for protesting.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you're not really there to hurt somebody. You're there to make a statement, and you're trying to do that in the most peaceful way. Sometimes people, as Jessica mentioned, get a little bit too passionate about that, and sometimes it becomes more of a personal issue rather than actual trying to help the whole situation as a whole. For me, I just say, you know, I completely understand certain situations where you have to make a little noise. For example, there was a situation here in Korea where the disabled were trying to get better infrastructure for the subway lines. And I completely understand, even though that really did affect the public, it was so necessary in my opinion. And though it was an inconvenience to us, I do understand when push comes to shove, sometimes that's the only option. But as long as you're not hurting anyone in the process.
And Walter, if I may add really quickly, that protest also actually alerted me to the situations and the realities of what people were going through.
Right.
Before that, I had no idea the situation. And a lot of these protests, if well used, I think sort of opens your eyes to a lot of the things that are happening that you never get to really know about.
Correct.
Right, it definitely sheds light on issues that really need attention here in our society. Now, that's all the time we have for today, but NewsGen is here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks today to Cheska Dainha.
Which is always my thank you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you guys. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.